The season is over, but the celebration is just getting started on this show. Who is Notre Dame's most valuable player? Which freshman stole the show? And what was the play of the year? It's award season on Locked On Irish. Let's hand out some hardware.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and today is Monday, February 3rd, and thanks for getting your work week started by making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, please take a second to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you might be tuning in today. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right. I am really excited for today's show. Luke Smith and I are going to hand out some hardware in our 5th annual Postseason Award Show. We do a preseason award show every year as a way to kind of predict how we think the season will pan out. Then at the end of every season, we hand out the official awards for Freshman of the Year, Breakout Player, MVP, and a whole lot more. This is going to be a longer show than normal, but it's a special occasion, and we always have a ton of fun doing this, so I hope you enjoy it as much as we do. Let's get it rolling. All right, Luke, the time has come for our annual postseason award show. I think this is the 5th time we've done this now, and I always look forward to it because it's a lot of fun. But before we get to the awards, I want to ask for your big picture thoughts on the season we just witnessed, because now that some time has passed and the sting of losing in the national championship has subsided to some degree, I feel like I've been able to reflect and really appreciate just how much fun that season was. So when you look back on the 2024 season for Notre Dame football, what's the first thing that stands out?
The 2024 season was an incredible ride. It was extremely long. It literally was the longest college football season ever. And I think I felt that to some degree, right? And not necessarily in a bad way, but just the fact that the season kicked off the last day of August in College Station, Texas, and then ended on January 20th in Atlanta, like 6 months basically. And I think the amount of fun we had watching this team, particularly over the last month and a half of this season, was really something special. And in order for that to happen, a lot of people had to step up, which, as we were kind of going through the exercise of giving postseason awards, made this difficult because I think there's a lot of cases to be made for a lot of these different awards. And maybe in the past that hasn't been the case, which is an indicator that the season didn't go as planned. And I think that the fact that this was so difficult and there's so many worthy candidates just goes to show what a ride it was and how many different pieces fit into that. So, yeah, and I kind of felt that way even as the game was going on or going into that game. But now that I've had a week and a half or so to reflect, definitely an awesome ride and the most fun team I've gotten to watch during my lifetime here.
You're right. I think that's kind of the fun of doing this exercise, doing the postseason awards, because I'm thinking back to so many different moments in the year and just going back through the games and some of the numbers from them. Like that game against Texas A&M, you could have told me that was 2 years ago. Like that's right. How far it feels in the past. And you think about how the vibes were around this team back in September coming off that loss in Northern Illinois. Like they spanked Purdue, but people weren't really that satisfied. Then there was that ugly game against Miami, and even that Louisville game. Like just there were so many things that didn't feel right about this team. And if you had told me back then that they were going to figure it out, make it to the national championship, I would have told you that you were insane. So now that we've had the time to look back and really see how everything played out, I think it makes you appreciate it a little bit more. And I think that's a good segue to get into the awards. So this is how it's going to work. We have a bunch of different awards we're going to get to. Some of them are a little bit more traditional, but we have our own names for them. So we like to explain the background and the context there, why we name them this way. And then we're going to reveal who we picked in the preseason as we sort of projected how the season would play out. We do a preseason award show, and now we give our final postseason award. So Luke, lead us off.
First award we have is the Club Fever Award for Freshman of the Year. For those not familiar with the former Club Fever, it was Michiana's hottest nightclub from the early 2000s to 2018 that essentially was a meeting point for all grades of the Notre Dame student body, but it was the one guaranteed spot where as a freshman at Notre Dame, you could definitely get in on Thursday nights. So that's where the name comes from. In the preseason, I had said Anthony Knapp was my projected winner for this. There's obviously a case you can make for Leonard Moore here, but I'm sticking with my preseason answer of Anthony Knapp. And here's why. I actually looked back at what I had written down for the preseason show, and it's kind of funny the way that this came out, because what I said was, I think the answer has to be Knapp if this season is to be successful as we want it to be. If Notre Dame is to make the college football playoff, host and win a playoff game, win a neutral site game, and give themselves a shot at the night in the Final Four, Anthony Knapp needs to be a very, very good offensive lineman. His nastiness and physicality that has been praised needs to show itself, and it needs to show in College Station. Pretty much all those things happened, which is pretty wild. Of course, he got hurt in the Final Four, but he sure got us there in part with the rest of the offensive line, with starting 13 games, getting so much better over the course of the season as an undersized left tackle for a guy that we thought came into the summer as the third-string center. The season that he had, I don't even know if he's going to start next year, but it really doesn't matter because he was awesome for what we expected of him.
I was so gutted for him that he wasn't able to play in the national championship game because he had been so consistent throughout the season. Look, it wasn't always pretty. He had 6 penalties, 6 holding penalties on the year, so that was frustrating at times. And yeah, there were times early on in the season that he got beat, but it's funny because I also took Anthony Knapp in the preseason. We did this basically right after we found out he was going to be the starter against Texas A&M, and nobody from the outside was giving Notre Dame a chance in that game, and a big reason why was because of Anthony Knapp. And I remember watching that game, and it's rare that I really focus on like one offensive lineman during a game, but at the start of it, I was just so intrigued with how he was going to fare against Nick Scorton and all the other studs on that Texas A&M D-line. I'm thinking, he's kind of holding up. It's not always pretty. Sometimes he's kind of flailing out there, but he set the tone early on, and he only got better as the season went along. But I'm actually going to take Leonard Moore in this one because he was just so good. He wasn't just one of the best freshmen on the team. He was literally one of the best players on the entire team throughout the second half of the year. He had the second highest grade of any PFF, second highest PFF grade of any player, I should say, and that backs up the eye test. Like, he was incredible. I think he's like one of the best tackling corners I've ever seen. He had 48 tackles. He only missed 7, which is really good for a true freshman quarterback. Teams targeted him 55 times, and he only allowed completions on 45% of those. That's the best on the team. Had 7 pass breakups, only 1 penalty. And the best thing that you could say about him is that after Benjamin Morrison got hurt, there was no drop-off. You could even make the case that it was an upgrade compared to how Benjamin Morrison had been playing prior to that. Obviously, you wish you had Benjamin Morrison, but Leonard Moore just was one of the biggest surprises of the season by far.
Absolutely. And if I can't remember what game that was in, but whatever the pass interference that was called on him was, I remember that being very ticky-tack too, for what it's worth. But yeah, and somebody brought this up the other day, and I forget the guy's name, but there was an article from a guy from On3 basically ranking the top 10 players going into next year in all of college football. Disclaimer, this list had Sam Leavitt from Arizona State at number 2 and Drew Aller at number 6. But Leonard Moore was number 8 on this list, and 9 was Jeremiah Love. But the fact that nationally a freshman cornerback has come so far and made such a name for himself that he's ended up on some guy's top 10 list going into a season, pretty remarkable. And again, a testament to what Mike Mickens has done in that secondary. But yeah, Leonard Moore was everything you could have asked for and more, filling in for Benjamin Morrison.
Before the season, Benjamin Morrison said that Leonard Moore is going to have a better career than him. And at this point, I actually believe it, which is crazy to say because Benjamin Morrison was just so talented. All right, for our next award, it is the Jonas Gray Award given to a senior who has a breakthrough year. Typically, it's a player who came in maybe with some recruiting hype and then just sort of had to wait their turn on the bench. But this year, you and I are both going in a pretty different direction.
Yeah, and in the preseason, I had said Bo Collins, and maybe that was me kind of trying to manifest that a little bit because Notre Dame needed a wide receiver to step up. And to be fair, to start the year, I think Bo Collins was Notre Dame's most consistent receiver in September. He had a pretty good game against Texas A&M, a touchdown against Miami. Then he really struggled in October and in November with drops. He did have the big touchdown catch against Georgia, and I won't forget that, but it really, I don't think qualifies for this award. I'm saying Jordan Clark, another transfer. And I don't think anybody was particularly excited when Notre Dame picked him up in the transfer portal. In fact, I think a lot of people probably had questions about why Notre Dame was so zeroed in on him, and they did it so quickly. But he was truly a lockdown nickel and part of what made Notre Dame's secondary so special this year.
Without a doubt. I'm also taking Jordan Clark going into the season. I picked Jane Thomas. I just felt like this would be the year where he became a more consistent receiver, considering last year it looked like he was going to be wide receiver 1 before he got hurt. But I'm with you, man. I think you have to take Clark. And like I was saying, usually it's a guy who's, obviously been around Notre Dame. This is a little bit different because he's a transfer. But there wasn't really any hype around Jordan Clark coming in out of high school. When he went to Arizona State, he had actually started for the Sun Devils for 2 seasons prior to coming to Notre Dame. So he was known down there. What is that, Tempe, Arizona, where the Arizona State is? Right. So he comes over to Notre Dame, one of the first players to commit to Notre Dame in the transfer portal. And I was a little bit skeptical because you look at what he did last year and you're like, man, that wasn't really good. But then everyone was like, no, he was playing through an injury. That is what really hurt him. So I was like, all right, let's see how he does. Started to hear some good things about him in spring. And then during the fall, man, he was incredible. And I think the fact that he's the son of an NFL Hall of Famer, his dad, Ryan Clark, is on TV all the time. Like, he did not get an offer to play at LSU, which is where his dad played and won a national championship. So even though he wasn't a highly touted recruit, people knew who he was, and he just didn't really have that great of a college football career. But man, did he go out with a bang, because he was excellent for Notre Dame this year. Great in coverage, also a really great tackler. So the fact that going into the season, I was like, yeah, I mean, he could be a decent player by the end of the year. It's like, this is one of the best players on the defense. It's just a testament to what he did and all the work he put in. And I'm glad that he got to experience one season like this, because he was a huge piece for this defense.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if he's going to get drafted per se, but I think he could get picked up by a team and stick somewhere, because the tape that he put out there was really strong this year, and Notre Dame needed it.
Luke and I still have a lot more awards to hand out, and coming up next, we're going to reveal which player had the best breakout season. But before we get to that, I've got to tell you about an awesome new promotion courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started and bet just $5, and if you win, you will score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59.
So the next award we have here is the Kyron Williams / Joe Alt Award for the player who will have a breakout season. Again, it kind of tried to manifest this in the preseason, said Jalen Sneed. And I will say, Jalen Sneed, for as much as he kind of struggled to start the year, and I think some people probably thought he might transfer after the Louisville game, he really came on strong the second half of the year, and especially in the playoff was great. So not a bad year for Jalen Sneed by any stretch, but I think the answer for this, for me, is Adon Shuler. A case could also probably be made for Drake Bowen, but Shuler turned out to be the perfect running mate for Xavier Watts at the back end of that defense. There really was no learning period for him either. He had to pick game 1 at Texas A&M and just looked the part immediately of a strong safety. Of course, he had the huge forced fumble against Georgia. And I think as you read coaches' insiders' pieces as the season went on, like when reporters would talk to anonymous coaches, say, what do you see? He was the name that came up all the time as the guy that really stuck out on tape in the back end of that defense. I think he's primed for a really big year next year, and he was just awesome. And frankly, I didn't really know what to expect for him after he missed a lot of last year with injury and redshirted. He was sensational.
He was 4th on the team in tackles, had 5 pass breakups, 3 picks, also had a touchdown against Georgia Tech, and he also has elite football aesthetic. He just looks like a badass at the back end of the defense, and Notre Dame is going to really count on him next year without Xavier Watts there to help him out. But him, Jalen Stroman, they could be a good safety combination. So I'm going to go with Jeremiah Love, and it's kind of cheating, I'll admit it, because I think all Notre Dame fans had really high expectations for Jeremiah Love. So it's not so much a breakout in the Notre Dame world because this is kind of what the expectation was for him this season, but I still think he exceeded my own expectations with just how good he was. I mean, he had over 1,000 rushing yards, averaged nearly 7 yards per carry, which is one of the top in the country. 17 total touchdowns, or 17 rushing touchdowns is insane. But I think from a national standpoint, he really broke out in a way that we haven't seen a Notre Dame running back do in a long time. Like, a big reason why is the highlight reel plays, the hurdles, and all that stuff. But Notre Dame has had really good running backs. Like, Wojciak Estime was really good. Kyron Williams was really good. Hell, even Logan Diggs was a pretty solid running back when he was there as well. I mean, you got to go back some years too. Like, they've had a really good run at running back, but I think that there is an appreciation from the outside about Jeremiah Love that we just haven't really seen, and he is going to go into next season with a ton of hype. He's going to be mentioned, as a potential Heisman finalist and things like that. And we haven't seen a Notre Dame player, specifically a skilled player, reach that status in a really long time.
We haven't, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, he might be on the cover of the next college football video game for all I know. I wouldn't be surprised by that either. And it's funny to think back on the fact that, yeah, there were definitely expectations for him going into this year, but the production was not close to there coming off his freshman season, which I think was a good one. But the way that he exploded onto the scene, as you said, surpassed even probably the biggest Jeremiah Love's fans' expectations.
Yeah, and he started out great with that game-winning touchdown against Texas A&M, and even in the loss to Northern Illinois, that was his first hurdle, and he scored a touchdown on that play, and he had so many great plays throughout the season. And like I was saying, Notre Dame has had a lot of great running backs in recent years, but in terms of like NFL potential, I think Jeremiah Love stands above the rest.
Absolutely.
All right, what's our next award here? So we did Senior Player of the Breakout Season. Oh, it's the one and only. This is a regular, the DCO Cafe Award. Player who is not a starter week one, but will have a huge impact. And for those who don't know, DCO Cafe is a little lunch spot on the campus of Notre Dame. I believe it's in a faculty/administration building. And the secret is probably out by now, and Luke and I are getting older every single year. But back when we were in college, this is one of those places. It was kind of a hidden gem on campus. Not that many people really knew about it, but once students found out the selection at this place, it started to become one of the hottest lunch spots on campus. People were not going to the dining hall. They were going to DCO Cafe. So this is for a hidden gem on the roster, someone who you didn't really expect to make big contributions early and then ended up being a huge part of the team. So who did you end up taking?
In the preseason, I had said KVA, and I think he had a great freshman year. But to me, this is a shared award, and it goes to Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler, two guys that easily could have left after losing their starting jobs in August. They could have left. I mean, right? They probably felt slighted by the fact that they weren't starting as seniors, but instead they stayed and entered the starting lineup in week 4 due to injuries and became emotional leaders for a run to the national championship game. Without those guys, it's really hard to imagine where Notre Dame's offensive line would have been. I mean, you had Pat Coogan playing a position he hadn't played at Notre Dame before too, playing center, and then Spindler filling in at guard. And that depth was so huge for Notre Dame. Were they the most talented guys? No, but they more than held their own and were strong players for them. And I think that they totally earned the right, having gotten their degree, to go on and get paid, although I hope that they don't get paid at Michigan and it's somewhere else.
The fact that both of these guys lost their jobs is pretty surprising, because I thought the battle was going to be between Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler for the other guard spot opposite Billy Strouth, and then Sam Pendleton kind of came out of nowhere. And honestly, if we're looking back at that was probably a big mistake by the coaching staff to let Sam Pendleton start. Now, hindsight is 2020. Rocco Spindler ended up beating out Sam Pendleton when he came in place of Billy Strouth for his injury, one of the many injuries that Notre Dame faced this year. But I totally get that. Those guys did have a huge impact for Notre Dame, and I'm glad that they're going to be able to get paid and get a guaranteed starting spot somewhere else. But I'm going with our guy, number 44, Junior Tui Halavaka, because I didn't expect him to make any impact on this team whatsoever. I was legitimately shocked that he didn't transfer before this past season. I mean, he started the year as a third-string Viper, and my preseason pick for this award was Boubacar Traore, who was the second-string Viper. So I guess I got the position right, but Boubacar looked like he was going to have a breakout season, be a dominant player. He suffers that torn ACL injury against Louisville. And then Notre Dame had nobody else to turn to except Junior Tuihalamaka. And I'm like, man, this is not good. This defense is really in a bad spot. And Junior turned out to be a really productive player for the Irish this year. 3 sacks, 32 tackles, pass breakup, an interception, two fumble recoveries, including one of the biggest plays of the season on RJ Oben's strip sack on Georgia right before the end of the first half. So I really don't know where Notre Dame would have been without Junior Tuihalamaka. The fact that he was a third-string guy and had the impact that he did is just a testament to the depth on the roster. But, man, not only was he a really good player, he's another player with elite football aesthetic, so he gets my award.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, too, and maybe this almost gets forgotten because it was so long ago, but the way that he filled for Patello and Traore was significant, too, because Patello tears his knee against Purdue. And then in the Miami of Ohio game, he was terrific to Tuihalamaka. He had an interception. He was all over the field. And then Traore tears his knee against Louisville. And you had Tuihalamaka and Logan Thomas playing way more snaps than anybody ever predicted in that game. Tuihalamaka has half a sack, plays all over the place. This was a guy that did not play in the season opening game against Texas A&M. And then in the Sugar Bowl, 4 months later, he's one of the best players on the field. Just an incredible year for him. No arguments from me on him getting this award either.
Yeah, he was a menace against Georgia. He was, like you said, he's one of the best players on the field. And the fact that we were watching a third-string defensive end make that kind of an impact against Georgia was just one of the many great moments on this season. But
I will just say the one last thing. It was kind of funny, too, listening to national voices talk about that after the game, too. Because, like, 44 is amazing. I love that guy. He's all over the place. Like, yeah, it's like the third stringer, but sure.
Yeah, and it's like that was not the reputation of him literally just a few months ago. They're like, man, this guy's still on the roster. But yeah, let's get to our next award because this is I can't say it's a favorite, to be honest, but it's one of it's definitely a mainstay on our award show.
So the next award is the Brothers Bar and Grill Award, which goes to the position group or player that might frustrate you at times, but will deliver when it counts. And I think a lot of listeners of the show are probably familiar with Brothers Bar and Grill on Eddy Street in South Bend, Indiana. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then good for you, I guess. But basically the gist of this is the service there is horrific. It should be a much better bar, great setup, great outdoor patio, but the service leaves so much to be desired. Food's not always that great, but every once in a while, like it really comes through. And that's the descriptor of this award. I think the obvious answer is special teams, but I'm actually going to say the receivers here to give us a different perspective on this because outside of the anomaly of the Northern Illinois game, Notre Dame never trailed in games this year, really. They never had to come back. They never had to throw the ball to have success. And there was sort of this looming question, if they get down in the playoff, can Notre Dame throw itself back into a game? And I think over the last 2 games, the receivers, and namely Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison, Notre Dame proved that it could actually do that. Greathouse exploded with the pair of 100-yard receiving games in the semifinals and championship game, and Faison really provided that spark throughout the postseason. But I think that they answered some questions that people had throughout the whole season. And really they had to because with the compromised Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard, kind of banged up himself and Jadarian Price ineffective, they couldn't run the ball. So they had to throw the ball, and those guys, those receivers made it possible for them.
That is a great pick for this award because at first I picked special teams as well, and I'll get into my explanation why. But you think about the times this year where they really had to count on the wide receivers. It really didn't happen until the playoffs. Faison had that huge game against Indiana. Greathouse comes out of nowhere effectively against Penn State and then Ohio State. And that is the type of wide receiver play that we have not seen in years. Like Jaden Greathouse especially, making contested catches, making plays after the catch, and just he might not be open, but Riley Leonard just threw him the ball because he trusted him. And I guess that's one of the downsides of it. It's like it felt like that was the first time where Riley Leonard had true faith in any wide receiver at all this season. I think that was part of the reason why I struggled as a passer. Not entirely, because he definitely missed on some easy ones as well. But it's like, did everything change when Jaden Greathouse went up and made that catch on third down against Penn State, where it's just one-on-one, goes up, makes a great play, and then does the Penn State celebration back to him. And it felt like from that point on, Riley was like, all right, I'm just going to go to him every single time. And they did. So hopefully, even though Notre Dame is going to have a different starting quarterback next year, that can carry over because Jaden Greathouse was unbelievable those last 2 games of the season.
Yeah, he was. And, even in the Georgia game where, oddly enough, Notre Dame actually probably had its most success of the postseason running the football consistently against Georgia. Receivers made some plays. Faison, I know a couple of these got wiped off the board, but just doing little kind of gadgety things, getting himself open. Bo Collins' touchdown catch was not an easy catch either. He really needed strong hands on that one too. It was tightly contested. Like, those are plays that we haven't seen Notre Dame receivers make in big games, and they made them. So you got to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah, I think there was an expectation that the receiver group would take a bigger step forward, and it just didn't happen on time, really. Like, there was more expectations for a guy like Chris Mitchell, who, now that the season is over, it is kind of funny looking back. Like, you're not going to hit on every transfer, right? And Chris Mitchell had over 1,000 receiving yards at Florida International, came to Notre Dame as a deep threat guy, didn't catch a single deep ball all season. Like, literally not one, unless I'm forgetting one.
As long as 28 against Army, which I kind of remember it.
Yeah. That wasn't even a deep ball, really.
No.
I don't think. That was like an intermediate pass, and he picked up some yards after the catch. So another, frustrating year for the wide receiver core. I mean, Jaden Greathouse led the way with 592 receiving yards, and most of those came in the playoff. But I think it's a step in the right direction. Greathouse comes back. Faison comes back. Malachi Fields is going to be a big addition. But let's go back to special teams, because I think they are the clear winner for this award, because, my God, were they frustrating at times. So this was a really going back through it, like all the ups and downs on special teams throughout the year. So let's go back to the Texas A&M game. Mitch Jeter comes up huge, 3 for 3 field goals. Big reason why Notre Dame wins that game. Then against Northern Illinois, 2 kicks blocked. I don't really put the second one on Mitch Jeter. The fact that Notre Dame was trying to kick a 62-yarder there, pretty bad, just in general. Miami was a disaster. They muff a punt. I think they had another kick blocked in that. Then they have the fumble on the opening kickoff return against Louisville. Like, it was a true disaster. And then halfway through the season, really starting with that Georgia Tech game, Marty Biaggi decides to just empty out all the fake punts that he has, and that becomes a big storyline for the second half of the season. Notre Dame has all these great trick plays. They work all the way up until the national championship game. Mitch Jeter, meanwhile, gets hurt, can't kick. Notre Dame doesn't have a field goal kicker, but everything else is good. Like, Bryce Young is blocking kicks, so everything else is trending up. Then they get to the playoffs, and then finally it all comes together. And special teams is a big reason why Notre Dame made it to the national championship. Mitch Jeter got his confidence back against IU. Then against Georgia, he comes through. Plus, they have a kickoff return for a touchdown. Jaden Harrison, it's like the reason they got him in the portal. And they also had to kick a game-winning field goal against Penn State. So it was up and down all season long, but in the biggest moments, they came through.
They really did. And yeah, I think that this is a great pick for this award, and probably the most fitting, because it probably most mirrors what you experience on a Brother's Day, where you actually get a half decent meal.
Yeah, just the pure euphoria when it's like a 70-degree day in South Bend for the first time in, 6 months, and the patio's open, and they're actually giving you the beers that you ordered, and the tab comes out correctly. Because I think that might be my favorite brother story, where they gave your tab to someone else, and you got a different Luke. And what was the final number on that one?
It was a couple $100. It should have been like $8. So yeah, that was sweet.
Have you been back since?
Not for actually the last time I was there.
Oh my God, the huge fight. Yes. Yeah. Wait, you got to tell that story. We can leave out names and faces, obviously.
Yeah,
but this just kind of puts it together.
Yeah, actually, so the last time I was at Brothers Bar and Grill, it was the night before the Indiana game, and I was kind of sitting in one of the back booths in there, and next thing I know, they really set the tone for violence for the postseason, because there was a bunch of old dudes just beating the absolute brakes off this poor group of like dads and their sons. All Notre Dame on Notre Dame crime. Strangest thing I've ever seen. Like, people getting thrown outside the side door and curb stomped. Somehow those guys got away with it. I think they're pretty well connected. They should probably be sanctioned and like banned from Notre Dame because it was disgraceful. But yeah, it was a wild, wild scene. I've never really seen a bar fight before like that. Like I've seen, small things. This was truly a fiasco. So
yeah usually bar
brothers.
Fights begin and end.
They don't last that long.
Yeah, 30 seconds, right?
This one just kept going. They started beating up the bouncers too. So.
And they got some pretty big bouncers at Brothers. What did they do? Did they do anything to stop it, or were there just simply too many people?
They just had to call the police eventually. And then by that time, the crew had bolted on a golf cart away. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I missed that one, but I remember hearing about that. And I think when we were walking on Eddy Street after that, there was still kind of a buzz. People were still talking about it. But, yeah. That's Brothers Bar and Grill. Don't think we're going to be getting a sponsor from them on this show anytime soon. All right, next one. I don't even know how we get back on track after that. The next one, we don't have a real winner for this award at this point in time because it's really just like a preseason thing, something that you're monitoring. So it's the 401k award, the player who might not have the biggest impact this fall, but you're just going to be monitoring their progress closely throughout the season. So who did you end up taking before the season started?
I had said Bryce Young, and I enjoyed what I saw. Early returns are strong on this guy. So, not a whole lot more to add, but we're looking at our portfolio like we like what we see with Bryce Young.
So I picked Gerby Lambert, and we didn't really see him in action much. He did get in during some garbage time, and it's something that I've already talked about a lot and what that offensive line is going to look like next year. And Gerby Lambert is maybe one of the more interesting pieces on that line because Notre Dame just started a true freshman all year long. And if you had said, like, going into the summer, Notre Dame is going to start a freshman at tackle, literally everyone would have said, oh, it's just going to be Gerby Lambert. But it wasn't. It was Anthony Knapp. Part of the reason is because Anthony Knapp was around in the spring, was more acclimated to the offense, but people thought that maybe at some point Gerby Lambert would jump him. That never happened. Now I'm still extremely high on Gerby Lambert. I think he has all the physical tools to become a future NFL player, but I don't think we should dismiss Anthony Knapp and his abilities and what he could do for the team next year. So I still think Lambert is probably going to start next year, but it's certainly not as much of a guarantee as I felt it was before this season started.
Yeah, it's good to have options. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, definitely good to have options. All right, next one.
We've got the MVP next, and I think there's probably only one answer for this, so we can talk about this. I had said Jeremiah Love in the preseason, and there probably is a case for it. I think he saw how Notre Dame's offense was impacted in the postseason with Love not close to 100%, but you have to say Riley Leonard here because with Notre Dame's offense limited with Love's injury and some inconsistency from Jadarian Price, Leonard won them the Georgia game, and his legs and his arm and his grit got them to come back against Penn State and battle against Ohio State. And there's a number of things I think we're talking about here. For a kid who a good chunk of the fan base wanted thrown out of town after week 2, and frankly, as late as November, I'd be at like the Virginia game. It wouldn't be a good possession. There'd still be idiots in the stands looking for Angeli or saying like pull Leonard. His resolve was incredible. And I think another important piece of this is the way that he embraced Notre Dame. There's a number of things that come to mind for me. After the team got back from the Sugar Bowl at 2 a.m, he posts a picture on Instagram of himself in front of Touchdown Jesus. And then before leaving for the national championship game, he's praying at the grotto the night before, posts a picture of that. He really embraced Notre Dame in a way that, frankly, I'm not sure a quarterback has done since Brady Quinn. He's only here for a year, but he seemed to have had the maturity to embrace it in the moment even more than maybe Quinn did. And I want to say that his leadership was second to none. His athleticism really masked a growing offensive line at times, and you got Notre Dame to play the last game of the season. It was an incredible ride, and I think your most valuable player has to be Riley Leonard here.
It's Riley Leonard, without a doubt. And it's funny how you and I have sort of come full circle with him because when he committed to Notre Dame in the transfer portal, I think you and I were one of the more skeptical people. We're like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I love this. I mean, I understand why they want to go in the portal. We don't know what they have in Angeli. CJ Carr is going to be a true freshman. And for him to get Notre Dame to this point, again, 1 year, 1 year only, and to really just set the tone of the national championship with that drive when they literally had nothing else. They're just like, we're going to just keep pounding the rock with Riley. I think it was just such a great moment for him, and I'm so glad he got to have that. And sure, I'm like, there's always going to be some Riley Leonard haters, and he definitely missed some throws in the national championship game, but I think all the rational fans came around to him because he literally represents everything that the university stands for. His attitude, the pride he has in his faith, everything. Like, we joke about how dorky his personality seems at times, but he's also an absolute dog. Like, that 3rd and 7 play against Georgia, we're going to get to our favorite play of the year. There's so many to choose from. That's up there for me. When he beats the linebacker, literally just stiff arms him to the turf, him one-on-one with Malachi Starks, top 15 pick in this year's NFL draft, All-American, Thorpe Award finalist. He runs right at him, and Starks is like taking a step back. He is afraid of Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard jumps over him, gets a first down. That all but ends the game right there. Like, that guy was willing to put everything on the line for the University of Notre Dame. And your point about him taking the picture in front of touchdown, Jesus in the grotto, like, a lot of guys, especially upperclassmen who live off campus, and especially a transfer who wasn't around for Notre Dame, like, they're not going to be spending any time on campus. They're going to be off campus. They're going to be off football all the time. But Riley Leonard really appreciated being a Notre Dame student athlete. And it's one of the main reasons why I never understood the vitriol from some of the fan base, because I thought he is everything that most fans want in a Notre Dame football player. So I'm glad that he was able to finish the season strong and go out on a high note for the most part, even though the last game didn't end the way that we wanted it to.
Yeah, no notes. Absolutely agreed.
All right, this next one was a new award before the season started, and there is another clear answer for this one. The Domer Fest, what the hell was that game? We could have called it, the Ball State, Vanderbilt, Louisville award.
I mean, it's going to just be called the NIU game now.
Yeah, this is a new award. It's going to be the Northern Illinois game, given out to the one game before the season that we should not be concerned about, but we are. And we both were actually on the same page going into the season. We both picked Miami, Ohio, which did end up being a really weird game, but it can't win this award.
No, it's NIU. I didn't enjoy Miami at all either. That was a bad watch, but what can you say? It's Thomas Hammock and the boys.
Yeah, it's Thomas Hammock and the boys.
Who literally might be like 5th for like most mentions of a single name on this podcast. I think Hammock's got to be in the top 5.
He's certainly up there. We have spent far too much time talking about Northern Illinois, though. So next one, a new award, just favorite play of the year. And man, there are a lot to choose from.
Yeah, there really are. I'm going to go with 2 here, and it's Jeremiah Love's touchdown against Penn State, and then also the back-to-back Christian Gray and X Watts pick sixes.
So 3. You're picking 3.
Yeah, those 2 I'm kind of grouping together.
Yeah, they
because
do.
I think the Love touchdown against Penn State drew the strongest response. Somebody took a video of me reacting after that play, and I've never really seen myself in a video like that before. But
I need to see that. Send that my way, please. Yeah.
It would also feel wrong not to mention Xavier Watts in some capacity during this show too, because of how important he was. He should have been a unanimous first-team All-American. Football Writers of America shouldn't have a vote after what happened this year. So we got to give him some sort of due, and that back-to-back sequence of pick sixes was incredible.
I agree. I was actually thinking about that when I was doing most valuable player. I'm like, we're really not going to give Xavier Watts anything, but it's like he's not a breakout, and I just don't think you could put him as the MVP, even though he was absolutely integral to this team's success. So I'm going to go with the Jeremiah Love touchdown against Indiana. I was thinking about taking the Jane Harrison kickoff return against Georgia because it was just this huge feeling of relief, like, oh my God, they're actually going to be able to do this. But then they still had to hold on for the rest of the game. But the Jeremiah Love touchdown just was like a perfect, I don't want to say way to cap off a great day because the whole game was such a fun party, but you and I have been to a lot of Notre Dame home games. The atmosphere, the buildup for that game was unlike really anything that I've ever experienced. And I think the fact that this play lasted for so long made it that much better because he ran 98 yards. So all day, the lead up to this game is awesome. The tailgates, it's so cold, but everyone is so excited. It's the first home college football playoff game ever. You could feel it. It felt different than any other game. Notre Dame did not have one really fun home game all season, so everyone's in town. Everything is building up to this moment. And then for Jeremiah Love to score the first touchdown in that game, it happened right in front of me. That was just such a fun play. And the celebration, the crowd, and you could just see it on the faces of all the Indiana fans, at least in my section. they were shocked. And I think they kind of knew that they were in for a long night. Then the next 3 hours or so, Notre Dame was just out there just dominating Indiana, and you knew that Georgia was up next. And it was like the first big play in another basically a new part of the season, right? Because Notre Dame ended up playing 4 more playoff games, and that just felt like such a great moment. And it's going to go down as one of the most notable plays in the history of Notre Dame football. So I think it's got to be that play.
Yeah, no arguments for me. I'd also be remiss to mention at least not one of Dylan Thieneman's 27 missed tackles. Notre Dame played Purdue, or more specifically, the Jadarian Price 65-yard touchdown run before half, where Purdue literally just gave up as Notre Dame was trying to run out the clock. That might be the funniest play I've ever seen. There were like 4 touchdowns in that game that were just – it was like – you know that video where it's like the mascots beating up on the little kids at halftime? That's like what the Purdue game was.
That was shocking. Looking back,
like how atrocious they were.
Yeah, and you think about remember the line.
People picked Purdue to win that game.
Dude, the spread in the days leading up to it was going down. It was like I think Notre Dame opened like 9.5, and then it was like 8.5, and then it was 7, and then I think it got as low as 6 before the start of the game. Notre Dame they covered 6.
They did.
They covered.
Sure did.
What did they win by? 56 points in that game. So maybe we'll do that. I mean, we have so much time in the offseason, like funniest plays in Notre Dame history, because that Jadarian Price touchdown is definitely up there.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
All right. This is our last award. It was a new one. Am I in Utopia? No, this is South Bend Award. It's just the best win of the year. Who do you got?
There's definitely a case for Penn State, and being at that game was awesome. One of the most fun games I've ever attended, but I have to say Georgia here, because to finally break through after 31 years and win a major bowl, first time in our lifetimes, particularly against the king of the sport, was special. And earlier today, I actually went back and watched the highlights of that game. And I think what was maybe lost in this run of the Penn State game and the Ohio State game was just how much it took for Notre Dame to win that game. Jeremiah Love was completely limited. Riley Leonard just had to put his body on the line. Jadarian Price had his best game of the playoffs. There was a couple runs, but it was significant. And the defensive line was incredible. Really, the whole defense was, and special teams were too. That win was so significant, and really Notre Dame had to have it, and they did, and then gave themselves a chance to play another one, and we know how it all shook out after that.
Yeah, it's weird that a win over Georgia is not the automatic pick here. So I'm going to take Penn State, even though that Georgia win was awesome. I think it's because the atmosphere around that game just felt off given the terrorist attack and given the fact that it was postponed and it was at the middle of the day on a work day. The vibes are just off now. It didn't take away from the enjoyment of winning that game at all, and it was a great game. But I think the way that the game played out against Penn State is what makes it the best, because even though they're not fun in the moment, comebacks are the absolute best. And Notre Dame did not have to come back really in one game all season long, other than Northern Illinois, obviously. But they were actually leading most of that game. It was just either that or tied. So anyway, this team was, backs against the wall, down 10-0. Everything is going Penn State's way. They get that field goal before the half, and then they come out with a great drive to open up the second half, and you're like, oh my God, this is a ball game. And then that whole second half was just haymaker, trading haymaker, and then you've got the Jeremiah Love touchdown, what he just threw people off to get in the end zone, and then the Jaden Greathouse touchdown to tie it, and then the Mitch Jeter field goal. There are a few moments in our life as Notre Dame fans that there's so much on the line, like that kick by Mitch Jeter. He knocks it in. They end up winning the game, and then they go on to the national championship. Those are literally two of the biggest wins of our lifetimes happening back to back. So I don't think you can go wrong with either selection.
No, absolutely. What tremendous wins both those were.
Well, that wraps up the awards. So, Luke, any final thoughts here as we, the page has already been turned to the offseason, but I'm glad we got to go back and look back on what a fun season it was, because like you said, this has been such a fun ride. And I've actually been dealing with postseason depression. It's just that was so fun. It's such a bummer that it's over, and it's now we just get to relive these moments.
Like I said, when this opened, it was an incredibly long season, and the attitudes towards it changed dramatically multiple times, going from the highest of highs after Texas A&M to really just wanting it to be over after, I think somebody on the show said that, after the NIU game, to really kind of embracing it again, I think right around, mid-October, and then after USC into the playoff, reaching a whole nother level, really just all consuming. And I mean that in a good way. It was a heck of a run, and I look forward to more. I don't think there will be one just like this, but more with similar outcomes.
What was the moment when this became fun again? Because you're right, it wasn't fun from Purdue, Miami, even Louisville. Stanford was a good sign. Certainly, they took a big step in the right direction. But when was the moment where you're like, all right, I'm fully back on this team. Everything is still on the table?
I don't know if I said this on this show or not. I definitely said it at some point. I think it was actually the Navy game, because although Navy was Navy, they were ranked, and just the way that Notre Dame just dominated them, and it wasn't a game at all. It's like, okay, they're kind of cooking. I think that they're gonna do this now.
Navy game is a good pick because Notre Dame moved to 7-1. They were ranked, and then you're like, okay, they're going to kill Florida State. They're going to kill Virginia. Probably going to beat Army. And then it's like, wait a second. Like, they beat USC. They're in the playoff. But, Luke, it's been a fun ride. Loved having you on every week throughout the season. I'm sure we're going to have to do some fun, weird offseason stuff throughout the offseason as we normally do. But until then, it's been a blast.
Absolutely. Thanks for another fun year.
All right, that'll do it for the Postseason Award Show. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning and the rest of the week, so make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And if you enjoyed the show today, please give this video a like if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast and you liked what you heard, remember, rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred platform. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.